In this 5-minute episode, I'm talking with the chief architect of IBM X-Force, who describes himself as a hacker, researcher, Team Hashcat, network ninja, and speaker. He's a pen tester, red teamer, vulnerability analyst, and many other things on an impressive list as long as my arm. He's a member of the Canadian Cybersecurity Network and holds ISP certification. Check out the closed captions for acronyms. OSCP, OSCE, and CISSP designations, which Prashant mentioned in our 3rd episode. Of course, I'm speaking with Dustin Heywood, who started out at SAIT on the network technician fast track. While we currently work for the same organization, we met by complete chance outside of work. Hey, Dustin, thank you for joining me today in this bonus episode. I was listening to your History on the Hacker podcast earlier this morning, and in recent history, you posted an article on LinkedIn about autism. Can you tell me a little bit about that article and whether it helps or hinders you with your work?
Absolutely. So one of my specialties is in password cracking. And in password cracking, we do a lot of pattern analysis. For years, I was always wondering where I could find hidden patterns in data, and then the recent autism diagnosis explained a number of things, but I found it's helped me in many ways. I see things in a unique light, and the difference in perspective has definitely helped my career. Team Hashcat is actually how I got deeply involved in cybersecurity, because I started off as a network engineer originally, wound up at a government bank, and I somehow got into doing cybersecurity analysis in a SOC. Got involved in Team Hashcat because we were cracking passwords, and I get really good at it. We'd compete every year in the annual DEF CON Crack Me If You Can competition, and that's what got me known as Evil Mog from Team Hashcat, and that's actually how I got my job over at X-Force. They were doing some recruiting at a conference, and the rest was history.
Cool. Now, I didn't send you these questions a week ago like I did for Abayabasi at the beginning of this mini-series. But I know that, like Prashant, you're very familiar with these terms, and you'll have an opinion on all of them. So I'd like you to rate on a scale of 1 to 5 the following technologies as part of a cybersecurity strategy. First one being SIM.
5.
And how about SOAR?
5.
And what about endpoint detection and response, EDR?
5, and I think EDR as well as NDR for that matter, so you asked me that next, is also a 5. Those are foundational controls that need to be deployed. But it's important you talked about SOAR because all these tools need to be combined together. If they're individual point solutions reviewed in different consoles, it's going to lead to a nightmare in trying to track down people like me.
We'll come on to another technology in just a moment about that. So yes, EDR, NDR, you've given both a 5. That's interesting. None of the other people I've interviewed have said that. They believe there's always room for improvement, but it's great to hear somebody from X-Force saying that those technologies are super critical.
Oh, there's always room to improve them. I didn't say they were any good. I just said they were absolutely critical to be running.
Gotcha. So how about, those are technologies used inside organizations. What about technologies outside, like attack surface management? So how does a organization look from the outside looking in, and how tempted will a hacker be to try to break in based on what they see from the outside?
So I think attack surface management should always be a 5. And the reason for this is if you don't know your environment, I mean, attackers will be scanning you almost every day from multiple endpoints, from multiple countries. Geo-blocking is next to useless in protecting you, for example. If you want to say block from nation states that are trying to attack you. The important part is someone ran a stat, they plugged a Windows XP machine onto the internet, and it was compromised within 45 seconds. Same with Windows Server 2003. So yeah, I think you should know what's on your network and assess it routinely.
Okay. So you hinted at this earlier. UAX, Unified Analyst Experience, where we can bring all of these tools together, accessible from a single dashboard or single pane of glass. And this is, the idea behind this is to increase productivity of the stressed and short-staffed cybersecurity teams that are out there today.
Well, absolutely. Here's the thing: we're short-staffed in cybersecurity, and we have this saying in the industry: attackers only need to be right once, and defenders need to be right all the time. If you combine all these services together, NDR, MDR, identity fabrics tied into, like, say, your authentication service silos, your attack surface management, then a defender just has to be right once. I mean, with dwell times up to 9 months in the environment, you need to detect attackers early and often. We have a saying in the environment: there are 2 types of companies in this world: those that have been breached and those that haven't been breached and don't know it yet. So yeah, UAX is absolutely critical, especially if you want to be able to detect some of these next generation threats.
So you're trying to detect these next generation threats with potentially 0-day vulnerability, without signatures, before you may have to go back through all of your storage and backups trying to find a clean restore point. We'll come on to that one with cyber resilience.
Here's the thing, 0 days aren't even the thing that scares me the most. It's 1 days or 20 days. Most environments can't patch themselves fast enough. You leave one system off because you don't have a proper asset management platform. Someone crawls in from, say, an ancient MS SQL 2005 that's exposed somewhere in dev. It's got credentials. People reuse credentials between systems. You know, the interesting stat we had last year was over 30% of attacks last year from credentials that were already known.
You were telling me just before we started recording, we were talking about ransomware diminishing a little and using valid credentials being one of the more common ways of breaking into systems today.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's an example. You know, someone has a password to their pizza place. They got a password to their airline rewards program that happens to be the same password as their bank and the same password as their company. Pizza place gets breached. All of a sudden, you know, that information gets shared in the dark web. And with this all being a big business, there's entire support systems, CI/CD pipelines. There's data feeds to attackers. They're going to try and test them extremely quickly. Password management and authentication management is absolutely critical in this day and age.
When an organization has been breached or has to file a regulatory report, technologies which we've mentioned so far haven't necessarily done their job to prevent the breach from happening, and data has been exfiltrated. We come on to GRC tools, so governance, risk and compliance. How important are they as part of a strategy, whether you're regulated potentially or you've got stakeholders that you need to report to?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Controls, you know, they need to be reviewed and validated. They're not a static set and forget. You need to ensure that somebody other than your data teams are making sure that those are in place, because most IT teams aren't in the business of keeping things secure. They're in the business of keeping things online. They have things like SLAs, SLOs. So the temptation to take shortcuts is there. So that's where GRC comes in. And the risk is also important because you can do 4 things with risk. You can accept risk, you can mitigate risk, you can transfer risk by insuring it, or you can simply ignore risk.
Not necessarily the best option.
No, not necessarily the best option, but it's things. I call GRC also a 5.
Yes. How about third parties to help with threat intelligence and advise on threat management?
Well, I'd say third parties are critical. Now, I'm biased because I work for a third party that does this business, so I'll preface this, but no organization can do it alone. And I mean, nobody. You need a independent set of eyes on almost everything you're doing. Everything from incident response to penetration testing to your auditing. You're going to need data from threat intelligence providers. So the more data you have, the better. But it's not just the more data you have, the more quality vetted data. Because again, we have a cybersecurity skills shortage. I'm not going to be able to maintain enough SOC analysts or threat intelligence analysts to go review this, so I'm going to need help.
Right. So while these technologies, you might rate them as a 5 as well, not necessarily that they're going to save you.
I'm not going to say they're effective.
Very important to the strategy.
They're very important to the strategy, and that's the thing. When I say 5 across all of these, technology is not the ultimate solution. Ultimately, people and process are the solution, and I'd rather go with less tools than more that I'm actually going to look at. Say I spent $100 million on all the shiny tools, but I didn't spend anything on training, on people, on processes and procedures. I just have a bunch of shiny toys, and maybe a free trip to the Bahamas from a cybersecurity vendor.
I think it's funny sometimes how some clients seem to have an idea about how much money they'd like to spend on the technology, and they can think it's expensive to spend that much money, but don't necessarily invest, or are on the side investing a lot more than that money in their own people.
They should absolutely be investing in training. If I had $100 million tomorrow to spend on an organization, I'd spend about 80% on training and 20% on tools.
So I know you were at CypherCon last year. Was it last year?
Last year and the year before.
You've probably been there every year.
I've been there for about the last 4 or 5.
And you were trying to crack a safe live in front of the audience.
CypherCon has a number of cybersecurity challenges and physical security challenges. And this award was called a Red Badge, which gives you free access to the conference for life. Every year, they basically take a transparent safe made out of acrylic, put a safe lock on it, and say whoever cracks the safe can get the Red Badge inside. I decided to buy $3,000 worth of safe cracking hardware, specifically a rotary encoder and computers mapping software, and I taught myself how to safe crack.
You're allowed to bring that to the conference?
Yeah, I brought that to the conference. And basically, I set up, they super glues a little rotary encoder to the safe, and it maps out the various positions of the safe as I'm feeling my way through it. I managed to crack the safe in about 11 hours.
Wow.
And the reason why it took me 11 hours instead of, say, 4, like the tool's designed to do, is trying to crack a safe while you're explaining what you're doing every 20 minutes because you brought a whiz-bang toy out makes it significantly harder.
Right.
And then I gave a talk that year on how I cracked the safe. So if I didn't crack the safe, I was kind of dead in the water. I believe a little bit of stress. I like to give live demos for fun. Other people skydive, I give live demos.
Right. Well, thank you, Dustin. It's been great speaking with you. I wish you luck on your path to IBM Distinguished Engineer and changing IBM. So you now know a bit more about threat management, threat intelligence, and ethical hacking from a Chief Architect of X-Forces perspective. And that wraps up this mini-series. I hope you've enjoyed watching this mini-series as much as I've enjoyed producing it.